A city on a hill, 2 moons above it, 4,000 years of stone holding its breath. Down in this palace, a corridor no one uses at second bell. Barefoot on the cold floor, a small girl, 7 years old, dark hair with a silver streak. She stopped because she heard voices behind the wall. Two men, low, careful. One of them she knew. The child must not live to her 8th birthday. She did not breathe. On the western hill, a soldier stood alone at a gate. 50, a scar along his jaw, his hand in his coat pocket around a small, smooth stone he had not looked at in 5 years. He did not know a market roof was already counting down. He did not know a child was already choosing him. He did not know that in 4 hours the quiet would end, and a small figure in a blue coat would come running up the hill alone, toward the only wall she trusted. The city was quiet, the way old cities are quiet before something breaks. Ashenvale, 2 moons, 4,000 years of walls holding their breath. On the western hill, a garrison, behind 3 walls of stone older than any human alive. A coal ring glowed in a guardhouse window. Second watch. A soldier stood alone at the south gate. Human. 50. A scar along his jaw catching moonlight. He watched the road. His name was Bran Hollister. Down in the palace, another corridor. A different kind of stone. A small barefoot girl stood frozen in a service passage where no voices were supposed to be. 2 voices. Low. Male. One of them she knew. The child must not live to her 8th birthday. The girl did not breathe. Somewhere between the palace and the gate, a market roof was already counting down, and a man who had asked for the posting no one wanted was about to learn why. The garrison bell rang second watch. Bran didn't move. He'd been standing at the south gate for 3 hours. His shoulder ached the way it always ached at second watch. Old wound, cold night, Ashenvale air pressing against a body that had grown up somewhere else. 50 years old this month. He didn't feel 50. He felt the shoulder. Corporal Kalen was somewhere behind him in the guardhouse warming his hands over the coal ring. Kalen was 22. Kalen thought 50 was ancient. Bran let him think it, because a man Kalen's age needed something to be sure of. And being sure that 50 was old and unlucky wasn't the worst thing to build a night around. The city fell down the hill in a slow tumble of stone. The palace glinted at the far end, silver on silver in the twin moonlight. Varith architecture didn't apologize. It sat. It weighed. It had been sitting and weighing for 4,000 years, which was longer than anyone had known what a wheel was for. Bran was here on a 2-year rotation. Second year. 6th month. He'd asked for it. Nobody asked for Ashenvale. Everyone wanted the softer postings, the trade cities on the coast, the joint embassies where you saw a familiar face at breakfast. Ashenvale was inland. Ashenvale was formal. Ashenvale did not like humans particularly and did not pretend to. It tolerated the treaty garrison because tolerance was the price of the treaty, and it kept the garrison in the western quarter behind 3 walls of the oldest stone in the city, which was, if you were reading the Varith right, a compliment. Bran had read the assignments list 18 months ago and put his name down for the posting nobody wanted. His commander had asked him twice if he was sure. Yes? Why, because. His commander had looked at him for a long moment and then signed the paper. That was how a man ended up at the south gate of a garrison in a city that didn't want him. He wanted the work that didn't require him to make a case for himself. He wanted the shift. He wanted the coal ring and the second watch in the shoulder. He did not want to be anywhere he might see a girl, any age. The Varith children walked past the garrison sometimes on their way to the temple district, and Bran had learned to look at the stones over their heads. Not because he disliked children, because he did not. Because Nella had been 7. Not 8, 7. And Merritt had been 39 the year the fever took her. He'd been 41. Nella had been 3 when Merritt died. Small, serious. Her mother's mouth. She used to bring him a rock every morning for 6 months after Merritt died. Just one rock, placed on the kitchen table beside his coffee, every day. He'd asked her once what the rocks were for. In case you forget how heavy things are, Daddy. She'd been 4. She'd been 7 when he lost her. He had been 40 miles away on a supply run. He got the call at 7 in the morning. He drove back at speeds that should have killed him and did not. When he got there, she was already covered. A raid, bandits, wrong place, wrong hour, not aimed at her, which somehow made it worse, because she had not even been the target. She had been a child in a place, and the place had been the wrong one, and Bran had not been there. 5 years ago, he was very careful now, careful about which shifts he took, careful about which corridors he walked, careful about the way his eyes moved across a crowd so they did not stop on any girl about 7 years old with dark hair and a serious mouth. I had made himself a man who stood at gates, who watched stones, who let Kalen think 50 was old. He carried one thing in his coat pocket, a small, smooth stone. He hadn't looked at it in 5 years. He knew exactly where it was. The bell rang the third quarter of second watch. Bran shifted his weight to the other foot. Down in the market district, someone was closing a shutter. He heard it 2 blocks away because the night was that quiet. Vareth cities were quiet at night in a particular way. They believed in silence as a civic virtue. They lit their lanterns low. They walked softly. They did not shout in public unless a building was on fire. He would remember later how quiet it had been, that specific night, because within 4 hours the city was going to be screaming. But right now it was quiet, and Bran was thinking about the market from 3 weeks ago. He'd been off duty, bright afternoon. He had gone down to the river market to buy a knife. His off-issue blade had cracked at the tang. The garrison quartermaster's replacements were the wrong shape for a human hand. There was a stall keeper in the third row who worked mixed blades, half Vareth steel, half human grip. Bran liked the man's work. Bran was 3 stalls from the knife makers when the crowd shifted. Not a panic shift, just a market shift. Someone pushing a barrow, a cluster of people opening around it and closing again. And in the closing, a small figure got separated from the person she'd been with. Bran noticed only because he was tall enough to see over the crowd, and because his eye tracked children the way an old habit tracked children, and because he was already, without knowing he was doing it, moving toward her before he decided to. She was maybe 7, Vareth, dark hair with the silver streak that ran in some of the old families, right side of the part, a blue coat with brass buttons. He counted the buttons without meaning to. 7, she was very still. That was the first thing that struck him. A 7-year-old in a market, having lost her handmaid, ought to be looking around, calling out, running. This one was standing, feet planted, hands at her sides, assessing. She turned her head slowly, north, east, south, west. Her eyes moved across the stalls in a pattern that was not a child's pattern. It was the pattern of someone taking inventory. He had not meant to speak to her, except the crowd was going to close around her again, and she was going to be moved with it. And she was very small and very still. And Bran Hollister had been 40 miles away one time in his life, and he was never going to be 40 miles away again. He crossed the distance in 6 strides. Miss. She looked up at him. Her eyes were amber, steady. She did not startle when a large, scarred human bent his knees to meet her at her eye level. She did not do the thing children did when a stranger addressed them. She looked at him the way a small ambassador looks at a large ambassador. She waited. Lost your grown-up. I don't know if she is lost or if I am lost. It's a matter of frame. Bran blinked. Fair, he said. What does your grown-up look like? Tall, green sash, fluent Vareth, poor common, she will be worried. Right. I would like to go to her. Understood. He stood up. He looked over the crowd. A tall woman in a green sash was pushing against the current about 20 yards away, her face the color of ash, her hands empty. He raised his hand. He waved. She saw him, saw the top of the small head beside his hip, and the ash drained out of her face in one instant and left her white and shaking. There, he said. Yes, the child said. That is her. She looked up at him. Thank you, sir. You've been helpful. She said it the way an adult said it. Careful register. Correct pitch. The verith formal for a stranger who had done a small, competent thing. Not warm, not cold. Correct. Any time, he said. She walked to the handmaid without hurrying. She let herself be gathered up and kissed on the top of her head. She did not look back at Bran. He watched them disappear into the crowd. He bought his knife. He walked back to the garrison. He did not think about the child again. Or rather, he thought about her the way he thought about a door he'd closed carefully. He had closed her. He had done a small, competent thing, and he had closed her. There was no shape in his chest where a 7-year-old with amber eyes fit. Except 3 weeks later, he would see her again. And the second time she saw him, she would run. The palace. 3 weeks earlier. A corridor behind the map room. Princess Kyra of the Varith was 7 years old. She was walking barefoot on the cold stone because she liked how it felt on the arches of her feet, and because she was on her way to steal one of the small honey cakes from the kitchen while the head cook was doing inventory. This was a well-established road. She had used it 11 times. She was proud of the number. She was in the corridor behind the map room when she heard the voices. She stopped. Because the corridor behind the map room was not supposed to have voices in it. It was a service passage. It was used by the cleaning staff at 7th bell, and by nobody else at 2nd bell. It smelled of stone and dust and the faint scent of the map room's ink drifting through the wall. 2 voices, male, adult, both Varith, both speaking low, not whispering exactly. Speaking the way people spoke when they were confident of privacy and had chosen to speak somewhere that felt private, even though privacy in a palace was always partially fictional. Kyra did not move. She had a rule about voices that were not supposed to be places. Her rule was that you listened until you understood why they were there. Then you left. Then you decided later whether to tell anyone. Her mother had taught her the rule. Though her mother didn't know she'd taught her the rule. Her mother had done it in front of her once, a year ago, overhearing something in a garden, standing perfectly still until she'd heard enough, walking away without a sound. Kyra had watched. Kyra had filed. She listened now. The timing has to be exact. It's exact. The market roof, you're sure it's structural. The roof is decorative. It's held up by 4 beams. If any 2 fail at the same second, the whole thing comes down. It will look like collateral damage. And she'll be where? She'll be at the 2nd stall from the north entrance. Yasha has been guided to buy the honey there. The girl is with her. And after in the smoke, she goes with the crowd. There will be a specific person in the crowd. He will take her hand. He will lead her east. She will be gone before anyone knows the roof came down on top of somebody who wasn't her. Silence. You understand what you're saying. I understand. The child must not live to her 8th birthday. That is the whole point. Kyra did not breathe. She had been holding her breath already, because she wanted to hear better. Now she held it for a different reason. She held it because her body had decided without consulting her that any sound at all was going to kill her. She recognized one of the voices. She had heard it 1,000 times in her life. She did not know the other. The date? The date is fixed. 3rd bell, 2 weeks and 3 days from now. Fine. Fine. Footsteps moved away toward the map room door. The map room door opened. Someone stepped out into the main corridor. The door closed. Footsteps continued. Kyra waited. She counted to 60. She counted to 60 again. When she was certain, she turned, and she walked back the way she had come, barefoot, on the cold stones, not stealing the honey cake. Because a person who has heard a thing like that does not steal a honey cake. A person who has heard a thing like that goes back to her own room, and she sits on the edge of her bed. And she thinks. She sat on the edge of her bed for a very long time. She did not tell her mother. Because. Because the voice she had recognized was a voice her mother trusted. And Kyra was 7 years old, and she had a rule about voices. But she did not yet have a rule about what to do when the voice belonged to somebody her mother would defend. She thought about who else she could tell. She thought about it for 2 weeks. The list was short. The list in the end was empty, because everyone she trusted was in the palace, and the palace was where the voice lived. And a girl who spoke to the wrong person about a voice that lived in the palace was a girl who did not live to her 8th birthday. So she made her own plan. The plan was simple. The plan had one step: find a wall. She was Varith. Walls were what her people had always understood. Walls were the first architecture, the oldest promise, the thing that stood between the inside and the outside and did not care which side the trouble came from. If she could find a wall, she could stand behind it. And if she could stand behind it, she could wait. And if she could wait, her mother would come. Her mother would always come. She just needed the wall. She knew the palace walls. She had known them all her life. She trusted them, except that the voice lived in the palace. So the palace walls tonight were not the answer. She thought about the temple district. Old walls, thick, but she had visited the temple every month of her life, and the person who wanted her dead knew every place she visited every month of her life. That wall was too obvious. She thought about the old quarter, the grain store, the library annex. None of them were right. Then she thought about the garrison. The garrison had the thickest walls in the outer city. She knew this because her tutor had told her in the tone tutors use for facts they wanted a princess to know without wanting her to be interested in. The garrison had been built on the pre-treaty foundation, 3 feet of solid stone at the inner wall, maybe 4, older than any wall the palace had. And the man who had helped her in the market, she had not forgotten him. She had recognized him. Her father had drawn a picture of a man once in the sketchbook she'd found in his desk drawer a year after he died. She had opened the drawer at 6, and she had taken out the sketchbook, and she had looked at every page, and on one page there was a portrait, a man with a scar along the jaw, gray coming in at his temples, a steadiness about the face that Kyra had not been able to name at 6, but had felt. Her father's small, careful hand had written under it, "This man saved my life. I owe him mine, and I owe him better than that." She had memorized the face, not on purpose. She had just done it. She was a child who memorized faces, and she had loved her father in the way a child loves a father who has died, with a fierceness that had nowhere to go, that stored itself in details, that made a mission out of any small thing she could find that was his. At the market 3 weeks ago, she had looked up and she had seen the face from her father's book. She had not run to him. She had held perfectly still. She had waited to see whether he would come to her. He had. She had thanked him with the correct register, and she had walked away without looking back. Because if she had looked back, she was going to cry. And a princess who cried in a public market at 7 was a princess who did not deserve the wall her father had drawn. But she had remembered where he stood duty. She had asked casually a week later of a guard she trusted which soldier at the south gate had the scar along the jaw. She had learned his name, Bran Hollister. She had written it down. She had put the paper in a box under her bed. Tonight, when the 3rd bell rang and the market roof came down 2 blocks away and the smoke rolled up over the outer quarter, Kyra did not go with the crowd. She did not take anyone's hand. She opened the window of her chamber. She climbed down the trellis she had climbed down 4 times before. She ran, not east, west, toward the garrison, toward Bran Hollister, toward the wall her father had put in her sketchbook when she was too young to know she would need it. Bran heard the bell. 3rd bell should not have rung. 3rd bell had rung. He turned. Not fast. He'd been in enough emergencies to know that fast was the wrong first move. The first move was to look. So he looked. Column of smoke rising from the outer market. Orange at the base. Black at the crown. Wind pushing it east. Kalen. Kalen was already at his shoulder. He'd come out of the guardhouse in a rush. The second watch corporal's face still soft with the leftover warmth of the coal ring. Sergeant, that's not a bell. That's an alarm. I know what it is. Should I wake the captain? Rotation to full standby. Open the south gate for civilian intake per emergency protocol 2. Now. Yes, Sergeant. Kalen ran. Bran stayed at the gate. Because emergency protocol 2 said you open the gate. It said you accept civilians. It said you sort them. Feed them if you had food. Blanket them if you had blankets. And keep the inner courtyard clear for military movement. It said you did not leave the gate. Because a gate without a man on it was a hole in the wall. And a hole in the wall in a crisis was worse than no wall at all. He watched the smoke. He watched the road down from the outer market. He waited. Within 9 minutes, the first civilians came up the hill. A middle-aged Vareth woman with 2 children. A young man carrying an older man on his back. A group of 3 merchants from the river district who had been closer to the fire than they should have been and had run. Bran processed each of them, counted, directed, kept his voice level. This was not his first fire. This was not his first refugee stream. He had done this before he was 30, and again at 40, and once on a border outpost when he was 47. The choreography did not change, only the faces. Kalen came back. Kalen took the intake log. The captain's runner arrived and gave clearance for full protocol. More civilians came up the hill. The courtyard began to fill. 59 minutes into the emergency at the 5th quarter of 3rd bell. Bran looked up and saw a small figure running up the hill toward the gate. Alone. He almost did not register it as a child. Because a child alone on a road during a fire was so wrong that his brain tried for a fraction of a second to make it be something else. A short adult. A trick of the smoke. A dog. Then his brain caught up. Girl, small, blue coat. She was running the way a child runs when the child has decided to run and does not intend to stop. Not fast, not desperate. Sustained. Legs eating the road. Chin up. Coat buttoned to the throat. She reached the gate. She stopped 3 feet from him. She was breathing hard, but her breathing was controlled. She looked up at him. Amber eyes, silver streak in the dark hair, the blue coat with every button fastened. Bran felt something go very still inside his chest. She looked at him, and she said in the clearest Vareth he had heard in his life, "Formal register, adult register." Absolutely correct. I need the largest wall you have. He did not move, because his body had done the same thing his brain had done a moment ago. It had tried to make her be something else. A small adult. A trick. A dog. Anything other than what she was, which was a 7-year-old girl, standing at his gate, during a fire, asking for a wall. "Sir," she said, because he had not answered. "Please," Bran's voice came back. "Come inside." She came inside. He closed the intake ledger. He handed it to Kalen without looking at Kalen. He walked with the girl through the courtyard. He walked her past 60 huddled civilians and through a low doorway into the supply corridor of the inner garrison. 3 feet of stone on either side. 4 in the deep places. The oldest wall in the city. He walked her to the deepest part of the corridor. She put her palm flat against the stone. She stood there for a moment. "This will do," she said. He got her a flatbread from the ration stack. He got her a cup of water. He set them on the floor beside her. He sat down against the opposite wall, close enough to be present, far enough not to loom. She ate half the flatbread. She drank half the water. She handed the rest back very politely and said, "Thank you. I'm not hungry. I appreciate the offer." She said it in 3 registers of Vareth in rapid succession, as if she was not sure which one was correct, and had decided to cover all 3. Bran nodded. She looked at him. She said, "My name is Kyra. My mother is the queen. I became separated from my handmaid Yasha at second bell when the market roof came down in the surge. I went out through the window in my chamber because it was faster than the corridors. The smoke turned me around twice. I reassessed. I decided that shelter was a better immediate objective than transit. She said reassess the way an engineer said reassessed. Bran nodded again. My mother will come here, Kyra said, when she has searched the other places. Eventually she will come here. I will wait for her. Yes, Bran said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, so quietly that Kalen at the far end of the corridor could not have heard even if he had been trying. Sir, you cannot let anyone in here. Not anyone. Not even a person wearing palace uniform. Bran felt the something in his chest go very still again. He did not ask her why. He said understood. She looked at him for another long moment. She was checking. He could see her checking. She was 7 years old, and she was checking whether he had said understood the way a man says a thing to comfort a child, or the way a man says a thing he means. Whatever she saw in his face was enough. She sat down. She leaned her small back against the stone wall, and she cried. She cried for 1 hour. She did not sob. She did not wail. She cried the way a person cries who has been holding a thing in for 2 weeks and has finally reached a wall thick enough to let it out. Silent tears, steady, shoulders shaking now and then, face turned slightly away, not to hide it, out of a kind of dignified privacy. Bran did not touch her. He did not speak. He had asked her early on, quietly, would you like to be held? She had shaken her head, once, firmly. No, thank you. Just here. Here she meant was the wall, and by the wall him, close enough to lean on if she wanted to, not required to. So he sat. He watched the far end of the corridor. He listened to the sounds of the courtyard beyond the doorway. He heard Kalen processing more civilians. He heard the runner from the captain report full protocol confirmed. He heard the ordinary sounds of a garrison doing what a garrison did in an emergency. And under those sounds, closer, he heard a 7-year-old girl cry against a wall his kind had helped build in a treaty older than his grandfather. I don't hand people off mid-care. The sentence formed in his head before he had thought about it. A thing he had said to somebody once. He couldn't remember who. It had been a long time ago, before the shoulder was old, before Nella. He had believed it then. He believed it now. He did not move. After an hour, she stopped crying. She wiped her face with the sleeve of the blue coat. She looked at the wall for a moment. She looked at him. Sergeant Hollister, she said. He looked up. Yes, I know your name. He did not answer. She said, I would like to lean against you now, if that's all right. My back is cold. Yes, he said. She got up. She crossed the small space of the corridor. She sat down beside him on his left, and she leaned her shoulder against his ribs. Her head found the space between his shoulder and his collarbone as if she had measured it. Her small hand rested on the top of his forearm. She was asleep in 4 minutes. Bran did not move, not for 2 hours. His shoulder ached, his back ached, his legs went numb. The coal ring at the guardhouse had gone out at some point, and the corridor had gotten cold. His left arm, the one under her head, went pins and needles, and then past pins and needles, and then to a distant static that was not quite feeling. He did not move, because she was asleep, because he did not hand people off mid-care. Because for the first time in 5 years, a small hand was resting on his arm, and the small hand belonged to a child who was breathing. And if he moved the smallest muscle in his body wrong, she might wake. And if she woke, she might remember why she had been crying. And if she remembered why she had been crying, she might cry again. And Bran Hollister, who had failed to be 40 miles closer on one specific day in one specific year, was not going to let a 7-year-old girl cry a second time on his watch if he could hold his back against a stone wall to prevent it. So he held. 2 hours. The city outside slowed. The bells rang the changing of the crisis watch. Kalen came to the doorway twice, looked in, left without speaking. The runner came once with a message and Bran waved him off with the smallest possible gesture of his right hand. The smoke thinned. Somewhere in the fourth hour of the emergency, a footstep entered the courtyard that Kalen's voice acknowledged with a sudden, absolute change of register. Highness! Bran's ears sharpened. He did not turn his head. He heard the queen's voice, low, level, controlled the way voices got controlled when the person owning the voice had been controlling it for 4 hours and did not intend to lose control now. I'm looking for my daughter. Highness, I think you should come inside. Footsteps, not fast, deliberate. A woman moving at the pace of a woman who has been told something she has been trying to be told for 4 hours and does not entirely trust her body to receive it without breaking. Bran kept his eyes on the far end of the corridor. She stopped in the doorway. He did not turn. He did not need to turn. He could feel her looking at the tableau on the floor. He could feel her processing it. He knew without watching exactly what her face was doing. Because he was a father. Because he had been a father. Because he remembered what a face did when it had been afraid for a child for a long time and had suddenly been given permission to stop. He heard her breathe. It was not a dignified sound. He kept his eyes forward. He waited until she was ready. She crossed the corridor. She sat down on the stone floor. She sat down without regard for whatever she was wearing and without regard for whatever queens were supposed to do. And she sat beside her daughter and looked at her daughter's face. Bran let her look for a long time. Then he turned his head. The queen was not what he had expected. He had seen her from a distance once at a ceremony. She had been a figure in ceremonial robes, tall, composed, untouchable. Up close at the 5th hour of a crisis night, sitting on the stone floor of his supply corridor, with tear tracks she had not permitted herself yet, she was a woman. Her hair had come partly loose from whatever pin held it. There was soot on the sleeve of her plain brown cloak. Her hands were shaking very slightly. She noticed him noticing, and she stilled them deliberately. The way a person stills a bird. She looked at him. Yours, he said. He had not meant to speak. He had said it as a man asks a plain question of a fact he already knows the answer to. Yes, the queen said. Bran nodded. He looked back at Kyra. She cried herself out, he said quietly. About an hour. She's been asleep for 2. The queen said nothing. She told me her name. She told me you would come. She said she had reassessed. She used the word reassessed. A sound came out of the queen that could have been a laugh in another life. Yes, she said. She would. She asked for the largest wall we had. Yes, she would. She said one other thing. The queen looked up. Bran kept his voice at the same register. She said not to let anyone in, not even someone wearing palace uniform. The queen went very still. She looked at her daughter. She looked back at Bran. Something passed behind her eyes that Bran Hollister, who had watched a great many faces and a great many crises, would not later be able to fully name. It was not surprise. It was not alarm. It was recognition. Thank you, the queen said quietly. You're welcome, Highness. She reached out her hand, slow, careful. She placed it on top of her daughter's hand, which was still resting on Bran's forearm. Kyra made a small sound in her sleep. Her fingers in the dream curled. They curled around Bran's forearm. Small fingers, warm, definite. They did not curl the way a child grips a stranger's arm out of comfort. They curled the way a child holds on to something she has decided is hers. Bran felt it. The queen felt it. Neither of them spoke. Bran looked at the small hand on his arm. He looked at the queen's larger hand covering it. He looked at the silver streak in the dark hair. And the small, serious mouth relaxed by sleep into something almost sweet. He thought Nella. He shut the thought down. He shut it down the way he had shut down every thought of Nella for 5 years. Cleanly, mercifully, with the discipline of a man who had built a life on the shutting down. Except the small hand did not move off his arm. Except the queen was still looking at him, not at her daughter, at him, as if she was seeing something in his face that he had not intended to put there. Except a voice at the far end of the corridor. Kalen's voice, low and formal, was saying, "Captain Ranulph has arrived, Highness. He requests permission to escort you back to the palace." Bran heard the name. He did not know Captain Ranulph personally. I knew of him, 18 years in the Queen's personal guard. The man who had walked at the Queen's shoulder every day of Kyra's life. A trusted man. An old man in the household sense of old, which meant known, which meant safe. He heard the Queen answer Kalen without turning her head. "A moment," she said. "Tell him a moment." "Yes, Highness." Kalen withdrew. The Queen looked at Bran. She said very quietly, "Sergeant, did she tell you anything else?" Bran thought about it. "I thought about the fact that Captain Ranulph of the Queen's personal guard was standing 30 feet away in the courtyard. And Captain Ranulph was by definition someone wearing palace uniform. He looked at the Queen. He looked at her the way he had looked at Kyra in the market 3 weeks ago. The way he looked at any small person who was, for whatever reason, standing very still in a place where standing still was not safe. He said, 'No, Highness, nothing else.' The Queen held his eyes. She read what he was saying. She read what he was not saying. She nodded once. 'Thank you,' she said again. She did not move to lift her daughter. Not yet. For a long moment in the 5th hour of a burning night in the pre-treaty corridor of a garrison. None of them had been born, and 3 people who had never before been in the same room stayed exactly where they were. A queen sitting on a stone floor. A human soldier holding perfectly still. And a small girl asleep between them, with her hand curled around the arm of a man her father had drawn in a sketchbook the year before he died. Outside somewhere at the mouth of the courtyard, Captain Ranulph of the Queen's personal guard waited to escort them home. And Bran Hollister, whose shoulder ached, and whose left arm was numb, and who had asked for the posting, nobody wanted, so he would not have to see a girl look down at the small hand on his arm, and understood for the first time in 5 years that he was not going to sleep tonight. Not because of the fire, because of the hand, because the hand had not let go, because the Queen was still watching him, because the child had told him not to trust the palace uniform, and the palace uniform was 30 feet away, and he was going to have to walk her back to it, because something had begun. He did not yet know what. He only knew that when the Queen finally gently gathered her daughter up into her arms, the small fingers stayed curled a moment longer than they should have, holding onto his sleeve, before finally releasing. And Kyra in her sleep said one word. She said it clearly. She said it in Varith. She said it the way a person says a name. Bran. The Queen paused. She looked down at her sleeping child. She looked up at Bran Hollister. And in the 5th hour of the night, in a corridor built by hands 4,000 years dead, Queen Alvarys of the Varith asked her second question of the man who was still sitting against the wall. "Sergeant," she said, "how does my daughter know your name?" Bran Hollister looked at her. "I thought about the market." He thought about the buttons on the blue coat. He thought about a small hand that had not let go. He said very quietly, "Highness, I was going to ask you the same thing." She held his eyes. She did not answer. She lifted her daughter carefully. She adjusted the blue coat. She stood. At the doorway she paused. She did not look back. "Come to the palace tomorrow, Sergeant," she said. "Second bell, the west gate. There is a question I would like to ask you where the walls are thicker." "Yes, Highness." She walked out. Captain Ranulph's voice in the courtyard. Formal. "Correct. Highness." Footsteps receding. The garrison quiet. The smoke thin now. Bran sat against the wall for another 5 minutes, because his left arm was numb, because the small hand had left a warmth on his forearm that had not yet gone away, because he was 50 years old, and he had made a life out of standing at gates, and something had just walked through his gate that he did not know how to process. Because Nella, he shut it down. He shut it down the way he had shut it down for 5 years. Cleanly, mercifully. Except, except this time the shutting down did not quite close. He got up. He walked back to the guardhouse. He took the coal ring from Kalen and warmed his hands over it for a long time. Kalen watched him. Kalen, who was 22 and who had spent the last 4 hours running the intake ledger of the largest civilian shelter operation in the western quarter of Ashenvale in half a decade, said Sergeant. Yeah. Was that the Queen? Yeah. Was that her kid? Yeah. Sergeant, why did the kid know your name? Bran looked at the coal ring. He reached into the pocket of his coat. He put his hand around the smooth stone he had not taken out in 5 years. He closed his fingers around it. He did not take it out. Not yet. Ask me again in the morning, he said. Kalen did not press. Kalen was 22, but Kalen was learning. He nodded once. He turned back to the coal ring. Outside, the twin moons of Ashenvale crossed the western sky. And down in the palace, in a chamber with a window that had been left unlatched from the inside because a 7-year-old had climbed out of it and no one had thought to close it, a small paper sat in a box under a bed. The paper said in a child's careful hand, Bran Hollister, Southgate, Western Garrison. This is the wall my father drew. Morning came. Bran had not slept. He had sat by the coal ring in the guardhouse until fourth bell. Then he had gone to his quarters. Then he had shaved. Then he had changed his shirt. Then he had stood in front of the small mirror above the wash basin for a long time, looking at the scar along his jaw, the one the child had memorized from a sketchbook when she was 6. The invitation came at second bell of first watch. A palace runner, folded note, sealed with the Queen's private seal, not state seal, private. There was a difference. Bran, who had learned to read Vareth sigils in his first year of posting, noticed it. The note said, Sergeant Hollister, I would speak with you today if possible. The small antechamber, not the audience hall. I not Queen Alvarez I. Bran stared at the single letter for a longer time than was reasonable. Then he put on his coat. Then he walked up to the palace. The palace guards knew he was coming. They did not stop him. They did not stare. They had received instructions, and they were carrying out instructions. And if Bran Hollister, Garrison Sergeant, walked up to the west gate of the Queen's Palace at third bell of first watch, then Bran Hollister was expected, and that was the end of it. He was shown into a small room, chairs at equal height, a view of a garden, no throne, no dais, nothing ceremonial. Alvarez came in without a retinue. She sat across from him. She said, Sergeant, Highness, I have 3 questions. Yes, Highness. Do you have children? Bran did not answer immediately, because the question framed that way in the present tense had a wrong answer built into every version of a right answer. I had a daughter, he said. She died 5 years ago. She was 7. Alvarez looked at him. I'm sorry. Thank you, Highness. My second question. Yes, Highness. Were you afraid last night of my daughter, specifically of what she asked of you? He thought about it. No, Highness. Why not? Because she wasn't asking me to be afraid. She was asking me for a wall. Alvarez was quiet for a moment. Then she said, my third question. Yes, Highness. My daughter's handmaid, Yasha, does not know how Kyra came to know your name. Kyra has never mentioned you. She has never asked about a human soldier. She has never, to Yasha's knowledge, been anywhere within 100 yards of the garrison. And yet last night, my 7-year-old child in a burning city ran directly to your gate. Yes, Highness. I would like you to tell me how she knows you. Bran looked at his hands. I met her once, he said, 3 weeks ago, in the river market. She had been separated from Yasha. I helped her find Yasha. That was the entire conversation. Alvarez tilted her head slightly. Did she tell you her name? No, Highness. Did you tell her yours? No, Highness. Silence. Highness, Bran said. I don't know how she knew my name. I believe you. Thank you, Highness. I have a fourth question. You said 3. I miscounted. He almost smiled. She almost smiled. What is it? Would you sit with her again? He looked up. She has not slept, Alvarez said. Not since I put her to bed last night. She lay in her chamber for 6 hours with her eyes open. Yasha sat with her. She did not speak. This morning she asked without preamble whether the soldier was safe. Bran was quiet. I told her yes, Alvarez said. She asked whether the soldier would come back. Yes, Bran said. I'll come back. Today. Today. Which was how it began. He came back that afternoon. Kyra was in the garden. She was drawing a bird with a piece of charcoal on a scrap of paper. She looked up when he came around the hedge. She did not smile. Kyra was not a child who smiled the way most children smiled. She looked at him the way she had looked at him in the market, steady, assessing, the small ambassador. Sergeant Hollister. Princess. My mother said you would come. She was right. I have a question. All right. Why did you sit still for 2 hours? He sat down on the garden bench beside her. At the distance a person sits when they are not sure yet whether they will be permitted closer. Because you were asleep, he said. Yes, but most people would have moved a little, to be comfortable. I know. Why didn't you? He looked at her. Because when you were tired, he said, you stopped trusting the wall. You started trusting me, and I don't hand people off mid-care. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, I don't know what mid-care means. It means when someone is in your care, you don't give them to somebody else halfway. Even if you get tired, even if your arm goes numb. Even then. She nodded slowly. She drew another line on her bird. Then she said without looking up, my father used to say something like that. Bran went still. He did. Yes, he said when you agree to hold something, you hold it all the way, even the part where it's heavy. That's a good thing to say. He was a good man. I'm sure he was. She looked up. Do you miss your daughter? Because Kyra was 7. Because 7-year-olds asked the questions adults were still trying to figure out how not to ask. Because Bran Hollister had come here to sit in the garden, and he had not come here to answer this question, and he was going to answer it anyway. Because Kyra had asked, because he did not hand people off mid-care. Every day, he said, every hour. Does it get better? No. Does it get different? Yes. She thought about that. How different? Some days it fits into your chest. Some days your chest fits into it. She nodded. She drew another line. I miss my father, she said. He died when I was 4. I don't remember him well. Except I remember his hands. And I remember he had a sketchbook. Bran felt something touch the back of his neck. He did not move. Did he draw, he said. Yes. What did he draw? She did not answer. She looked at him for a moment. She looked at her bird. She looked back at him. She said, Sergeant Hollister, ask me another day. He nodded. All right. She went back to her bird. He sat with her until the light turned amber over the garden. Then he stood, bowed the shallow bow appropriate to a princess of her age, and walked back to the garrison. Alvarez was waiting for him at the west gate. She said, she spoke to you. Yes, more than she has spoken to anyone in 6 weeks. Bran was quiet. She spoke to you, Alvarez said again. Quieter. Not to me, Highness. I am not angry, Sergeant. I am learning something. Highness, she loves you. I know she talks to me because I don't, because I am not. Because you are not required to be her mother, Alvarez said. You are not required to make her feelings turn out well. You can just sit. Yes, Highness. Alvarez looked at the garden. I have not been able to just sit, she said, since my husband died. Bran did not answer, because there was no answer. Because a queen who had been queen alone for 3 years was telling him something she was probably not supposed to be telling him. And the right thing to do was not to make her regret it. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "Yes, Highness." He came back the next day. He came back the day after that. 3 visits in 2 weeks. Officially on the ledgers, he was there to formalize 3 arrangements the Queen had promised him. A reader from the records hall, a grain agreement, a stone carving exchange for Corporal Wren. Unofficially, he sat in the garden with Kyra. And unofficially, sometimes when Kyra fell asleep on the bench with her head on his shoulder because she had begun to do this at hour 4 of a long afternoon, without asking, Alvarez sat across from them and did not speak. On the 3rd visit, Kyra asleep, the Queen said quietly. "Sergeant, Highness, tell me about your daughter." He looked at the small dark head against his shoulder. He thought about saying no. He thought about saying, "Highness, I do not." He thought about the way Alvarez had said, "I have not been able to just sit." He said her name was Nella. She was 7 when I lost her. I was 40 miles away. He stopped. Alvarez did not press. She let the sentence sit. Then she said quietly, "Was her mother Merritt?" He looked up. "How do you know her name?" "You spoke it in the corridor. When Kyra was asleep, you didn't know you were speaking." Bran was quiet for a long time. "Fever," he said. 9 years ago, Nella was 3 when Merritt died. And then, bandits. Wrong hour, wrong place. "I'm sorry, Sergeant." "Thank you, Highness." "You came here after." "Yes." "You asked for the posting nobody wants." "Yes." "Why?" He looked at Kyra. "Because," he said, "I did not want to be anywhere I might see a girl." Silence. Alvarez said. Bran did not answer. Alvarez did not press. She said instead, after a long moment, "My husband was named Valen. He died 3 years ago. The physicians called it a fever. I did not believe them. I have not believed them for 3 years. I could not tell you why. It was a thing my body knew that my mind could not verify. I have kept quiet. Because a queen who accuses her own physicians of incompetence or worse, without evidence, is a queen who loses her counsel." "Yes, Highness." "Sergeant Hollister, I am telling you this because you told me about Nella." "I know, Highness. I have not told anyone." "I know, Highness." She looked at him. "Ask me tomorrow if I have started to believe myself." "Yes, Highness." Which was how it began. The second thing. Except. Except the second thing was not going to wait for tomorrow. Because that night at ninth bell, Captain Ranulph came to Bran's garrison quarters unannounced wearing plain clothes. Ranulph had 18 years of the Queen's shoulder. Ranulph was by definition someone wearing palace uniform. Or he had been. Tonight he was wearing a plain gray tunic, and his gray hair was uncovered. And he looked older than his years, in the way men looked older when they had been carrying something for a long time. Bran let him in. Ranulph sat down at the small table. He put a leather binding on the table. He did not open it. "Sergeant Hollister." "Captain, the Queen sent me." "Understood." "She said if a man walks into your quarters carrying a leather binding, listen to him. She said if you do not trust me, listen anyway and check what I say against a second source." "All right." Ranulph pushed the binding across the table. "This is the personal journal of Master Vel, the royal physician who treated King Valen during his final illness. Master Vel died 2 years ago. His widow brought his effects to the Palace Records Hall last week to be sealed and archived per protocol. A records clerk found this binding in the bottom of the 3rd box. She flagged it. It came to me this morning." "What's in it?" "Medical notes, symptoms, doses, observations. Master Vel was thorough. He wrote everything." Ranulph paused. "Sergeant, the symptoms he recorded across the last 6 months of the king's life. They are not the symptoms of a fever. They are the symptoms of a slow poison. A specific poison. A trace metal compound that mimics a wasting fever, but is not one." Bran felt the room narrow around him. Master Vel knew. Master Vel suspected. He wrote his suspicion in the margin of the 9th month. He wrote, "If I did not know better, I would say this was toxicological. I do not know better." And then, Master Vel died, 2 months after the king, of a fever. Silence. Bran looked at the binding. "Captain?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Why are you telling me and not the council?" "Because the Queen believes you." "She believes me about what?" "About her daughter's request in the corridor. She did not tell me at first. She told me this morning. She said my husband was murdered and I have known it for 3 years and I could not say it. My daughter has known something for 2 weeks and could not say it. And a garrison sergeant with a scar on his jaw was told by my 7-year-old what she has not told me." "Captain." "Sergeant, I do not know which of us in this house killed my king, but I have decided to find out. And I am not going to do it alone. And I am not going to do it inside these walls." Bran was quiet. "She wants your help," Ranulf said. "She wants it because you have no faction. You have no allies in the court. You have no cousin who wants my job. You have nothing to gain. And Kyra asked for you, which the Queen does not take lightly." "What do you want me to do?" "Two things." Bran waited. "One, the night of the fire, someone opened the side door of the palace from the inside before the attack. 3 people have the code to that door. The Queen, me, and Chancellor Sethric." Bran went still. "Sethric?" "Yes." 23 years of service." "Yes." "The man who trained the Queen in council procedure when she was 14, man." "Yes, and I need to know if he did it. I cannot ask him. He knows me. He would see it in my face. He does not know you. He has never spoken to you. You can watch him." "Watch him how?" "Follow him off hours. See where he goes. See who he sees. Report to me every third night. Do it for 2 weeks. If he is clean, we clear him and we look elsewhere. If he is not clean." "Understood." "The second thing." "Yes." "Sleep in the palace tomorrow night." Bran looked at him. "Where?" "Outside the princess's chamber, in the corridor, on a bench. The Queen has arranged it. Ostensibly, you are there as a courtesy, a visiting officer. There will be an official reason. There will always be an official reason from now on. Your real assignment is that a 7-year-old girl told you 2 weeks ago not to trust palace uniform. And I am palace uniform. And Sethric is palace uniform. And I am telling you this, because if I am wrong about you, I have just handed a stranger the location of the future queen's bed. And if I am right about you, then I am asking you to do the thing you already asked to do the night of the fire." Bran looked at him for a long moment. "What did I ask to do?" "You asked to not hand her off mid-care." Bran looked at the leather binding on the table. He looked at Ranulf. He said, "I'll do it." Ranulf exhaled. "Thank you, Sergeant." "Don't thank me, not yet." "No," Ranulf said. "Not yet." He watched Sethric for 9 days. He took Kaelin with him, because Kaelin was 22, and Kaelin needed to learn. And a man who was going to run a garrison one day should learn what surveillance looked like from someone who had done it in 3 different theaters. Bran did not tell Kaelin who they were watching. Bran told him they were watching a man, and they were watching him for the Queen. And Kaelin, who had spent the last 2 weeks watching his sergeant get invited to the palace at second bell and come back at fifth bell, without explanation, did not ask a second question. Kaelin was learning. Sethric was a creature of habit. Sethric rose at fifth bell. Sethric took tea in the West Arcade. Sethric reviewed dispatches until second bell of morning watch. Sethric walked in the Temple District in the afternoons. Sethric dined with the same 3 colleagues twice a week. Sethric did nothing suspicious for 8 days. On the 9th day, Sethric did not go to the Temple District in the afternoon. He went to the river market. He walked past the knife maker's stall Bran had bought his blade at. He walked past the honey stall. He turned into a narrow alley behind the flatbread ovens. He stopped at a small door in the back of a spice warehouse. The door opened. A man came out. The man was Vareth, middle-aged, dressed in the plain gray of a recusant officer. Bran knew the cut. Bran had studied the cut. It was in every intelligence briefing the garrison received. But Bran did not recognize the specific man. Kalen did. Kalen leaned in and whispered, "Sergeant, that's Vantis. He's third in the recusant border command. He was on the map you showed me last week." Bran turned his head slightly. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. The nose, the gray at the left temple only, the way he holds his left hand." Bran looked at Kalen for a moment. Then he looked back at Sethric and Vantis. Sethric and the Varith officer spoke for 11 minutes. Sethric handed the officer a folded paper. The officer nodded once and went back inside. Sethric walked home. Bran followed him at 50 yards, in the loose gait of a man not following anyone, until Sethric was safely inside the palace west gate. Then he went to Ranulf. He took Kalen with him, because a young corporal who had just identified a recusant third in command from a paper map while walking behind his sergeant on a surveillance detail, he was not officially cleared for deserve to sit in the room where the report was made. Bran put a hand on Kalen's shoulder outside Ranulf's door. "Son, Sergeant, you did good work." Kalen's face, which had been arranged all afternoon in the neutral mask of a corporal doing what he was told, did a small thing. Just a small thing. Around the mouth. He nodded. He said, "Yes, Sergeant." He did not say what he was thinking. He was thinking that in 5 years of service, first at the coastal posting, then at the joint outpost, then here, nobody had ever called him son. He filed that. He would think about it later. They went inside. Ranulf listened. He did not move for a long time. Then he said, "The council convenes tomorrow at 4th bell. Sethric will present the trade report. He will be there. All of us will be there. The Queen will be there. Yes, we take him in front of the council. Yes, publicly. Yes, so he cannot signal anyone before he is contained. Yes." Ranulf looked at Bran. "Sergeant, if we are wrong about him, there will be no coming back from this." "We are not wrong about him. You are certain." "I saw the paper change hands, Captain. My corporal identified the courier. I know a recusant drop when I see one." Ranulf nodded. "4th bell," he said. "Be in the corridor, not the chamber. I do not want your face in the room. Sethric will see faces. I want him to see only ours." "Yes, Captain." 4th bell came. The council convened. Sethric rose to present the trade report. He spoke for 4 minutes about grain reserves. He turned a page. He spoke for 2 minutes about the eastern trade route. He turned another page. He raised his eyes to the Queen and began to speak about the treaty garrison supply agreement. Ranulf, who had been standing behind the Queen's chair, stepped forward. He did not speak. He simply stepped forward. And 2 guards who had entered from the side doors on a silent signal moved into position behind Sethric's chair. Sethric stopped speaking. He looked up. He looked at Ranulf. He looked at the Queen. He looked at the guards behind him. He said very quietly, "Highness." Alvarez said, "Chancellor." "Highness, may I ask?" "No," Alvarez said. "You may not ask." Sethric closed his eyes. For a fraction of a second, Bran, standing in the corridor with the door cracked open 1 inch, saw Sethric's face do something no one else in the room could see. It was not surprise. It was not defiance. It was not fear. It was relief. The face of a man who had been carrying a thing for a long time, and had just been told he could put it down. Then Sethric opened his eyes and composed his face and stood, and the guards took his arms, and he walked out of the council chamber under escort without another word. At 11th bell of the night, in the cell 3 floors below the palace, Chancellor Sethric began to weep. He wept for a long time. He wept the way a man wept who had been holding onto a rope for 2 years and had suddenly let go. He asked to see Captain Ranulf. Ranulf came. He sat across from Sethric in the cell. He did not speak. Sethric said through the tears, "Captain, Chancellor, I did not do it for gold. I did not do it for power. I did not do it because I hate the queen. I have loved the queen for 23 years. I loved her father. I love her daughter. Chancellor. He told me, if I did not open the door on the night of the fire, if I did not carry his messages to the recusants, if I did not do the small things he asked, he would kill Kyra. Not fast, not clean. He said, Chancellor, understand me. She will not live to her 8th birthday, and no one will ever know it was anything but a fever. Ranulph went still. Who, he said. Setheric looked at him. Captain? Who told you that? Setheric shook his head. I cannot say the name aloud. Not here, not in this palace. If I say it aloud, and I am wrong about the walls, he will know within the hour. He will act within the day. Captain, Chancellor, send the queen, send her alone. Send her tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight. Why? Because he is not going to wait. Silence. The market roof was supposed to kill her. It did not. The fire was supposed to force her into the wrong hands. It did not. He is running out of time, and he knows it. He will move tonight. He will move on the child. Ranulph was already standing. He was already moving toward the door. He said over his shoulder, Guards, nobody in or out of this cell. No food, no water, no visitors, not even the queen, until I return. Yes, Captain. He ran. In the corridor outside Princess Kyra's chamber, Bran Hollister sat on the bench with his back against the stone wall. He was not asleep, because he had said he would not be asleep, because he did not hand people off mid-care. His left hand rested on his knee. His right hand rested near but not on the short blade at his belt. The blade was borrowed. His off-issue knife was garrison steel, and he had not been permitted to carry it into the palace. The palace blade was Vareth make. The grip was wrong for a human hand. He had noticed. He had adjusted. He watched the far end of the corridor. The lantern at the corridor's east end guttered slightly, not from a draft, because there had not been a draft in this corridor at 11th bell for the entire 9 days he had been observing the palace. The corridor was interior. It did not draft. The lantern guttered because a door had opened somewhere close. Bran stood up. He did it slowly. He did it silently. He did not draw the blade. Because if the person coming down the corridor was Yasha, or a servant with a tray, or the queen, drawing the blade would be a mistake he could not walk back. He waited. A figure stepped around the corner at the corridor's east end. Not tall, not short, dressed in the plain uniform of a palace servant. Face hooded. The figure walked toward Kyra's door. Not fast, not slow, the pace of a person who was supposed to be there. Except no servant walked this corridor at 11th bell. Except palace servants did not wear the hood up indoors. Except the figure's hands were empty of a tray, and empty of a lantern, and empty of anything a servant would be carrying at this hour. Except the figure's right hand held loose at the side was not empty of everything. It was holding a blade. Curved, short, dark. Bran stepped out from the bench. He stepped into the middle of the corridor. He said in level Vareth, Wrong hall. The figure stopped. For a fraction of a second, neither of them moved. Then the figure moved. Fast. The blade came up in a rising arc aimed at Bran's throat. Bran pivoted his hips to the left. The blade crossed the space where his throat had been. He caught the wrist with his left hand as it passed, and he did not let go. He punched the figure in the sternum with his right fist. The figure grunted. The figure recovered. The figure was trained. The figure twisted the blade wrist, and Bran felt the tendons of his own left hand scream as they held the twisting wrist against its own strength. The figure kicked at his knee. Bran absorbed the kick with his thigh. He did not let go of the wrist. He drove the figure back 3 steps. He slammed the figure's wrist against the stone wall. The blade did not fall. The figure had trained through pain worse than this. Bran could feel it in the tendons of the wrist he was holding. This was not an amateur. This was a professional. This was a man who had been hired for one thing and who intended to complete it. The figure's left hand came up. Something glinted. Bran saw the second blade too late. The second blade went into his right shoulder. It went in 3 inches deep. It scraped the top of his collarbone. It stopped when the crossguard hit muscle. Bran did not make a sound because Kyra was through the door 6 feet from him, and she was asleep. And he was not going to be the reason she woke up screaming. He drove his forehead into the figure's face. Something in the figure's nose broke. The figure staggered. The first wrist was still in Bran's left hand. The second blade came out of Bran's shoulder with a wet slide he was going to feel for a long time. He kicked the figure in the knee. The figure went down. Bran went down on top of him. He put his right knee across the figure's throat. He put his right forearm across the figure's second wrist. He said very quietly in Vareth, "Who sent you?" The figure's eyes locked on his. The figure's jaw worked once. Bran saw the small movement in the mouth, saw the tongue push against the teeth, saw the small hard bead crack between the back molars. "No," Bran said. He tried to force the figure's mouth open with his free hand. Too late. The figure's body went rigid, then loose, then still. The corridor lantern guttered again. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opened. Ranulph's voice, low and urgent. "Sergeant? Sergeant?" Bran was already on his knees beside the figure. His right hand pressed against his own shoulder, the palace blade lying beside him on the stone. Ranulph came around the corner at a run. He stopped. He took in the scene. He said, "Sergeant, he's dead. He bit a capsule. I couldn't stop him." "Your shoulder." "Deep, not the artery." Ranulph crouched. He looked at the figure. He looked at Bran. He looked at the closed door of Kyra's chamber. He looked back at Bran. "Is she awake?" "I don't know." "How?" "I don't know. Maybe she slept through it. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she's on the other side of that door listening and not making a sound." Ranulph exhaled. "Sergeant," Sethric confessed. "Yeah. He said it was going to happen tonight." "Yeah. He was right." "Yeah." Ranulph put his hand on Bran's good shoulder. "Sergeant, Captain, you did not hand her off mid-care." Bran looked at the closed door of the princess's chamber. He looked at the small line of light under it. The lantern in her room was on. It should not have been on. She was 7 and she had been asleep 2 hours. Except the light was on. And as Bran and Ranulph watched, the door opened 1 inch. A small face appeared at the gap. Amber eyes, silver streak in the dark hair. Kyra looked at the dead man on the corridor floor. She looked at Bran kneeling beside him, one hand pressed to his own shoulder, blood soaking the front of his shirt. She did not scream. She did not cry. She opened the door another inch. She said in the clearest Vareth either of them had heard in their lives, "Sergeant Hollister, you're bleeding." "Yes, Princess." "Come inside." "Princess, my room is warmer than the corridor." "Princess." "Sergeant." "Yes." "Please." Bran Hollister, whose right shoulder was bleeding into the palace blade grip he was still gripping in his good hand, whose left tendons were burning from a wrist he had held against its own strength for 11 full seconds, whose face was going white in the way faces went white when a body had just spent everything it had, looked at the small face at the gap in the door. He said, "Yes, Princess," and he crawled, because his legs were not going to walk across the 6 feet of stone corridor. And Kyra opened the door for him, and she stepped back to let him in. And behind him in the corridor, Captain Ranulph of the Vareth Guard stood over the body of the man who had come to kill the future queen of the realm. And he looked down the corridor, toward the palace's inner wing, where a small ornate door led to the private quarters of the royal household, and where behind one specific door in that inner wing, a specific man was at that very moment being informed by a specific runner that the plan had failed, and the child was still alive. Ranulph's face went very still. He said to no one in particular, Get me the queen. Inside the princess's chamber, Bran sat on the floor with his back against the side of Kyra's bed. His good arm rested on his knee. His bad arm hung at his side. The blood had begun to slow, because the blade had missed the artery, because he had known where to put pressure without thinking about it. Kyra sat cross-legged on the floor in front of him. She was pressing a folded white nightgown against his shoulder. Her hands were small, careful, steady. She had not asked him what happened. She had not asked him who the man was. She had not cried. She had gotten a basin of water from her washstand. She had wet a cloth. She had wrung it out. She had cleaned the blood on his neck first, then his jaw, then the edge of the wound she could reach without moving the shirt. She had done this while Ranulf was still in the corridor. She had done this while Bran was still trying to convince his lungs to breathe evenly. She did not speak until she had finished. Then she said, "Sergeant." "Yes, Princess. You sat still for me for 2 hours." "Yes. I am going to sit still for you for 4. He looked at her. Her small face was very serious. The amber eyes did not blink. "Princess." "Sergeant, 4 hours is a long time." "I know. Your mother is going to come in." "I know. She is going to tell you many things." "I know. Some of them will be hard." "I know." He looked at her for a long moment. He said, "How do you know?" Kyra did not answer. She pressed the nightgown a little firmer against his shoulder. She looked at the door, then she looked back at him. She said, "Sergeant Hollister." "Yes. Ask my mother about the sketchbook." She lifted her hand off his. She walked to the door. She opened it. She said over her shoulder without looking at him, "But not tonight. Tomorrow. Tonight you rest." She walked out. Bran sat against the side of her bed. His right shoulder throbbed. His left tendons burned. His head buzzed with the specific static of a body that had lost more blood than it had budgeted for. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat. His hand was shaking. He didn't stop it. He took the small, smooth stone out. He held it in his palm. He looked at it for the first time in 5 years. Small, gray, perfectly ordinary. The kind of stone a 4-year-old could carry in her fist and bring to her father's kitchen table and place beside his coffee every morning for 6 months. "In case you forget how heavy things are, Daddy." Bran Hollister sat on the floor of the princess's chamber, and for the first time in 5 years, he let himself feel the weight of it. The whole weight. Not the shutdown version. The whole one. His shoulders shook once. Just once. He did not make a sound, because Kyra was outside the door, and because he did not hand people off mid-care. Then he closed his hand around the stone, and he waited for the queen. Bran woke in the palace infirmary. The ceiling was high, painted the pale blue. The Varith painted the ceilings of rooms where people were expected to heal. His right arm was strapped across his chest. His left hand was bandaged. His mouth tasted like the tea they gave people after they had lost blood. He turned his head. Kyra was sitting in the chair beside the bed. She was not drawing. She was not reading. She was sitting. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her feet did not reach the floor. Her back was straight the way an adult's back was straight when the adult had decided to be present for something. She had been there a long time. Bran knew. He could tell by the light on the wall. He could tell by the way her small back had already learned the chair. He said, "Princess." "Sergeant." "How long?" "4 hours. You have been sleeping 4 hours." "Yes." "Why?" She looked at him. She said, "Because you sat still for 2. Bran closed his eyes. Because. Because a 7-year-old girl was returning a favor. Because she had understood at 7 what most people never understood at 70, which was that the way you thanked the person for a stillness was to be still for them in return. He opened his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome, Sergeant." "Princess." "Yes." "Are you all right?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Princess." Sergeant, I heard everything. He looked at her. Everything, he said. The fight, the man, the door. My mother came. She sat with me. She held me. She did not lie to me. She told me a man had come and you had stopped him. She said you were hurt. She said you would be all right. She was right. How did you know? Because you said you would not hand people off mid-care, and you were not going to hand me off by dying in a hallway. He almost laughed. I did not have the ribs for it, he said. Correct, Sergeant. She nodded once. Then she got down from the chair. She walked around the side of the bed. She stood beside his left hand. She looked at the bandage. She looked at his face. She reached out and put her small hand on the top of his bandaged hand, very carefully. She did not press. She said, Sergeant Hollister. Yes. My mother is going to come in a moment. She has some things to tell you. Some of them are hard. All right. You have to be ready. I'm ready. Sergeant? Yes. You have to be really ready. He looked at her. He said, Princess, is this about your father? She did not answer. She lifted her hand off his. She walked to the door. She opened the door. She said over her shoulder without looking at him, Ask my mother about the sketchbook. She walked out. Alvarez came in a minute later. She had not slept. He could see it in the fine skin under her eyes. She was carrying a small object wrapped in cloth. She sat in the chair Kyra had left. She placed the object on her knees. She said, Sergeant, Highness, have you traced the money? Which money? The money that paid the man in the corridor. The recusant currency Sethric was carrying to the courier drop. The gold that hired the market roof engineers. It all comes from one household. Which household? She said the name. Prince Talvor. Bran stared at her. He knew the name. Every human on this posting knew the name. Prince Talvor was Valen's younger brother. Prince Talvor was the man who had sat at the Queen's left hand at every state function for 3 years. Prince Talvor was Kyra's uncle. Prince Talvor had 6 weeks ago given Kyra a small ivory bird for her name day and told her he loved her more than his own life. Highness. Yes. Your husband's brother. Yes. Kyra's uncle. Yes. Bran was quiet for a long time. Then he said, because he had to. Highness, what did he do? Alvarez looked at the wrapped object on her knees. She said, he poisoned my husband over 6 months, slowly, carefully, in doses small enough that Master Vel could suspect, but not confirm. He killed Master Vel 2 months later to end the suspicion. He has spent the 3 years since consolidating position at court, waiting. Waiting for what? For the Varith succession law is specific. When a monarch dies, the throne passes to the eldest living child regardless of age. A regent rules until the child reaches majority. But there is a clause. If the child dies before their 8th birthday, the throne does not pass to a distant cousin. It passes to the deceased monarch's next of blood sibling. Talvor. Talvor. Bran closed his eyes. He needed her dead before she turned 8. Yes. And the recusants. A stage set. He funded them. He amplified their threats. He gave them information. He created a plausible political enemy so that when Kyra died, the death would look like the collateral of a broader war. And he would step forward in the smoke as the grieving uncle, and he would take the throne to protect his brother's memory. Highness? Yes. He held her, Bran said. At the ceremony 6 weeks ago, he held your daughter and he called her his heart. Alvarez did not answer, because there was no answer. Because a man who could hold a child in one hand and dose her father with the other was a category of person a queen did not have a sentence for. She said Ranulph is moving on him tonight, publicly, in front of the council, with the evidence, Sethric's confession, the physician's journal, the money trail, the courier assassin. Talvor will have no legal move. He will be stripped and exiled by dawn. He will die in the Eastern Territories within a year. How? Because the Eastern Territories do not forgive men who kill their own brothers, even ones the realm chooses to spare. Bran nodded. She looked at the wrapped object on her knees. She looked up. Sergeant, there is something else. Yes. I need to ask you a question. Yes. 3 years, 6 months ago, where were you posted? Bran went still. He thought. He said border escort, Sector 9, convoy duty. It was a temporary assignment. I was there 4 months. Do you remember a Vareth diplomat named Ronwyn? No. He was traveling under an assumed name. He was accompanied by 2 guards, both dressed as merchants. Their convoy was ambushed at a canyon pass near the Sector 9 border. 3 men from the ambushing party were killed in a defense action. The diplomat survived. Bran did not move, because he did remember, because he had not thought about it in 3 years and 6 months, because it had been one action of many, because he had been the ranking sergeant in the convoy detail that day, because the merchant convoy had been jumped by 6 men, because he had without instructions and without time moved his squad to intercept, because they had lost no one, because the merchant whose face he had seen for 6 seconds before the man had been rushed into a covered wagon by his own guards had been a Vareth of medium height with graying hair and steady eyes. And he had said to Bran in a common trade language before he was pulled into the wagon, I owe you. Bran had waved it off. That was what a man did when a stranger owed him something. He had never seen the merchant again. He had never known the name. Highness, he said. Yes. She unwrapped the object on her knees. It was a small leather-bound sketchbook. Old, worn at the corners. The kind of book a person carried for years. She turned it to a page near the middle. She held it out to him. Bran looked at the page. His own face looked back at him. Charcoal. Careful. A younger face than his current one. Fewer gray hairs at the temples. Same scar along the jaw. Same eyes, drawn from memory, by a man who had seen him for 6 seconds. Under the drawing in the small, careful Vareth hand was a single line. This man saved my life. I owe him mine, and I owe him better than that. Bran looked at the page for a long time. He said, and his voice was not entirely his. The diplomat, yes. Was Valen, yes. Your husband, yes. I saved him. 6 months before Talvor finally succeeded in killing him. Yes. Bran closed his eyes. He was quiet for a very long time. Alvarez did not press. She let him have the silence. Because there is a specific shape a moment takes when a man learns that a small kindness he did not remember doing had bought a stranger another 6 months of life with his wife and his 4-year-old daughter. Because there is a specific shape it takes when he learns the 4-year-old daughter grew into a 7-year-old girl who had memorized his face from a sketchbook and had run to him in a burning city because her dead father had drawn him and told her he was a wall. Because Bran Hollister, who had come to Ashenvale to not see a girl, had been chosen by a girl before he had ever met her. He opened his eyes. He said, Highness, she knew my name because Valen drew you and wrote your name under the drawing. She found the sketchbook when she was 6. She memorized every page. Yes. She saw me in the market 3 weeks ago and recognized you. She did not tell me. She did not tell anyone. She asked a guard your name quietly a week later. She wrote it down. She kept it. She waited. She waited for what? She waited to be sure. Sure of what? Alvarez looked at him. She said, sure that a wall her father had drawn was still a wall. Bran did not answer. He could not answer, because his throat was doing a thing his throat had not done in 5 years. Alvarez reached out. She placed her hand very briefly on the top of his bandaged hand, very light, very brief, the way a queen touched a man she was not entitled to touch, and did anyway, because the room required it. She said, Sergeant Hollister. Highness, my husband kept a promise you did not know he had made to you, which is that when Kyra was old enough to understand, he was going to bring her to find you. He wrote it in the sketchbook. On the next page. She turned the page. Bran looked. The next page had a single line in the same careful hand. If I do not find him, Kyra, you find him. His name is Bran Hollister. He is at the western garrison of Ashenvale. He is a good man. Do not be afraid to ask. Bran looked at the line. He looked at Alvarez. He said very quietly, Highness, your daughter did not run to a stranger in the fire. No, Alvarez said. She ran to the man her father promised her. The council convened at fourth bell. The chamber was full. Ranulph stood at the queen's right. The queen stood, which she almost never did. Prince Talvor sat in his customary seat at the queen's left, wearing the pale gray silk of state, his hands folded in his lap, his face composed. He looked, Bran thought, watching from the same corridor he had watched Sethric from, like a man who did not yet know. He was wrong. Talvor had known since 11th bell the night before, when the runner had come and told him the assassin had failed. Talvor had known since dawn, when Sethric's cell had been sealed. Talvor had known since first bell, when a servant loyal to him had reported that Ranulph was moving through the archives with the physician's journal. Talvor had known for hours. He was composed because he was not going to be anything else, because composure was the last card in his hand, and he was going to hold it until it was taken from him. The queen spoke. She did not raise her voice. She said, before we open the day's business, this council will hear a matter of state. Talvor did not move. Chancellor Sethric was arrested yesterday for treason, the queen said. He has confessed. He has named the person who coerced him. That person is present in this chamber. Talvor's face did nothing. The evidence is threefold, the queen said. The private journal of Master Vel, royal physician to King Valen, which documents symptoms inconsistent with the fever the crown was told killed my husband. The financial trail linking payments to the recusant faction, to the market roof engineers, to the assassin who entered this palace last night, and to the courier who received Chancellor Sethric's letter in the river market 9 days ago. All to a single household treasury, and the confession of Chancellor Sethric himself, given under witness, Captain Ranulph and myself, in which he names the specific person who threatened the life of my daughter to compel his cooperation. She paused. She looked at Talvor. Prince Talvor, she said, rise. Talvor rose. He did not protest. He did not deny. He did not fight. He stood in his pale gray silk with his hands folded in front of him, and he looked at his brother's widow across the width of the council table. And he said in the voice he had used to comfort her 30 years ago when Valen was still a boy, Alvarez. She looked at him. She said, you will not speak my name in this chamber ever again. Talvor closed his eyes. Guards, Ranulph said. The guards moved. Talvor did not resist. He allowed his hands to be bound. He allowed himself to be turned toward the side door. He allowed himself to be led out of the council chamber that he had entered for the last 22 years as a prince of the realm. At the door he stopped. He turned his head. He looked past the guards. He looked past Ranulph. He looked past the council. He looked directly at Bran Hollister, who was standing in the corridor watching through the cracked door. Talvor's mouth moved. He did not speak aloud. But Bran, who had spent 30 years reading faces at a distance, read the shape of the words. You. Talvor's mouth said, it was you. Both times. Bran did not react. Talvor was led away. The council chamber sat in silence for a full minute after the door closed. The queen stood. She said, this session is adjourned. We will convene in 3 days to review the succession safeguards and the emergency protocols that failed. Master Ranulph will take command of all household security effective this hour. Chancellor Sethric will be spared execution in recognition of his cooperation. He will be exiled to the northern monasteries and will serve there until his death. She paused. One more matter. The council looked up. I will be adjusting the treaty garrison protocol. The garrison of the Western Quarter will no longer be considered auxiliary to palace security. It will be considered co-equal. Its officers will have standing invitation to household councils on matters of civilian shelter, cultural exchange, and mutual defense. This adjustment is effective immediately. She looked around the table. Sergeant Bran Hollister of the Western Garrison will hold the standing invitation on behalf of his commander. He will attend in that capacity when he wishes. This is not a decoration. It is a working arrangement. He has earned it 3 times over in the last 3 weeks, and I will not have this council forget it. She sat. The council did not react, because a council did not react to a queen who had just done what she had just done. They would react in private. They would talk in private. They would test the shape of the arrangement in private, in this room, in this hour. They would sit still. The session adjourned. Bran Hollister stood in the corridor for a long moment after the door closed. His right arm was still in a sling. His left hand still ached. The queen had just named him by name in front of the council of the realm. He was not sure what to do with the information. He walked back to the infirmary. Talver was exiled at dawn. I was put on a horse. He was given 3 days of provisions. He was ridden east under guard to the border. He crossed the border alone. Within 11 months, in a mountain town in the Eastern Territories, he was found dead in his rented room. A trade injury, a knife wound. Nobody investigated because nobody in the Eastern Territories investigates the deaths of Varith princes who killed their own brothers. The realm was told he had died of a fever, which, in its own way, was almost fair. Kyra's 8th birthday came 6 days later. She had asked for it small. She had written the guest list herself in her careful hand. She had submitted it to her mother with a note attached. The note explained her reasoning, which was that large celebrations required attention to many people at once, which was tiring. And when attention was divided, it was not fully given to anyone, which seemed incorrect for a birthday. The queen had read the note. She had made no adjustments. The guest list was 7 names. The 7th name was Bran Hollister. He arrived at 7th bell. He came in the plain garrison dress uniform. His right arm was out of the sling, but still stiff. He carried a small package wrapped in the coarse gray twine the garrison used for parcels. Corporal Wren had made the package. Wren had been informed 3 days ago that her sergeant intended to give the princess a birthday gift. Wren had said in the direct way Wren said everything. "Sergeant, let me." "Wren, I've been drawing the patterns for 9 months, sir. Let me do this one thing. The cover. I'll do the cover. She can fill the pages." "Wren, Sergeant, please." "All right." Wren had spent 3 days on it. She had used a scrap of tooled leather she had been saving for herself. She had carved into the cover 3 patterns Master Yarrow had told her in their guild sessions were the oldest surviving foundation marks in the Varith tradition. Marks that predated the treaty. Marks that had been carved into the first walls the Varith had ever raised. The book was small. It was blank inside. It was for a person who understood what the patterns on the cover said. A thing of quiet significance. Bran brought it to the palace at 7th bell. Kyra found him before the reception staff had made any introductions, because Kyra had been watching the garden gate for 20 minutes. Because Kyra had been tracking his arrival with the specific attention of a child who had made a birthday list and was now confirming that the list had held. She slowed to a walk 3 steps from him. She said, "You came. You invited me. I wasn't sure you would. You invited me." She looked at the package. He handed it to her. She unwrapped it with both hands. The way she unwrapped things she was treating as important. She saw the leather cover. She saw the patterns. She saw the blank pages. She looked up at him. The look on her face was the look he had first seen in the market 3 weeks ago. Steady, assessing. Except that behind the steadiness this time was a thing that had never been in her face before. Delight, contained, careful, real. She said, "Sergeant." "Yes, Corporal Wren made this." Yes, you told her. She told me. Kyra nodded once. She said, tell her thank you. Tell her I want to see more of the patterns. Tell her I want to know which ones are oldest. I'll tell her exactly that. She hugged the book to her chest. She said, you will sit next to me at dinner, if you want me to. I want you to. Then I will. She walked into the palace ahead of him. The way she walked into every space with the complete confidence of a person who occupies every room she enters. He fell in a half-pace behind her. His right arm hung stiff at his side. His left hand ached. His shoulder ached. His back ached. He did not care, because a small ambassador was walking ahead of him, carrying a book with foundation marks on the cover, and had told him he would sit next to her at dinner. The dinner was in the small hall. 7 guests, and the Queen, and Kyra, and Bran at Kyra's right. 4 of Kyra's selected companions from the city quarter, whom she had chosen for reasons she had not fully disclosed. An aged tutor, a cousin of the Queen's who was 7 months pregnant and radiantly tired. The Queen sat across from them. The Queen did not speak much. She let Kyra run her own birthday, which Kyra did with the precise gravity of a small state minister. She introduced everyone to the tutor. She asked the pregnant cousin how she was sleeping. She fed one of her companions a piece of honey cake because he was left-handed and the honey cake had been placed on his right. She turned to Bran at the 3rd course and asked him whether he liked the soup. I like the soup. It's a family recipe. It's a good recipe. You are being polite. I am being honest. You are being both. Bran almost laughed. She looked at him. She said quietly, Sergeant? Yes. I heard my mother yesterday. What did she say? She was talking to Captain Ranulph. She said, now that the danger is past, I do not know what to do with the man. Bran went still. She meant you, Kyra said. I understand who she meant. I have thought about it. Have you? Yes. And I have a suggestion. Bran waited. Kyra said, I think she should ask you to stay. Not as a soldier, not as a bodyguard, not as a person on a ledger, just to stay. Because I want you to. Bran did not answer. Because a 7-year-old girl who had just turned 8 was giving him a piece of political counsel from the far side of a birthday suit. And the counsel was in essence a request from her heart to his. And there was no correct sentence for a man of 50 to say back. He said, Princess. Yes, that is not a decision she can make for me. Or you. Or me. I know. It is not a decision I can make lightly. I know. It is not something a person decides between courses of a dinner. I know that too. She looked at him. She said, but if she asks, will you think about it? He looked at her. He said, yes, I will think about it. She nodded once. She went back to her soup. After the meal, the guests dispersed to the garden. The Queen had arranged for lanterns. The lanterns were low and warm. The twin moons of Ashenvale were rising over the palace roofs. Kyra was showing her 4 companions the patterns on the cover of her new book. She was reading from Master Yarrow's original list of foundation marks, which Corporal Wren had annotated for her on a small folded page tucked inside the cover. She was explaining in her own voice the difference between a foundation mark that predated the treaty and one that came after. She was, Bran thought, watching her from the far side of the terrace thoroughly herself. Alvarez came to stand beside him. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she said, Sergeant, Highness, I want to say 2 things to you. Yes, Highness. The first is that the sketchbook, Valen's sketchbook, I am giving it to you. He turned his head. Highness, that is your husband's. Yes, and he drew you in it, and he wrote your name in it, and he wrote a promise to my daughter about you in it. It was his book while he was alive. It was mine after. It is yours now. Kyra knows. She agrees. Highness, Sergeant, take it. It is not a state gift. It is a private one. Bran was quiet. He said, thank you, Highness. The second thing, yes, Highness. Alvarez looked at the garden. She looked at her daughter laughing quietly at something the aged tutor had just said. She looked at the twin moons. She said, "The garrison rotation ends in 6 months. You will be reassigned. Standard practice." "Yes, Highness." "Sergeant?" "Yes." "Would you consider not rotating out?" Bran did not answer. "I am not offering you a title," she said. "I am not offering you a position. I am not putting you on a payroll or a ledger. Those are all things I could arrange, and I will, if you want any of them. But those are not the offer." "What is the offer?" "The offer is a room in the palace, quarters of your choice, freedom of the household, a standing seat at any meal you want to attend, a garden bench in the West Orchard, which is my favorite, and which she is coming to like, and which nobody else uses in the afternoons, a key to the archives, access to the Stone Carving Guild whenever you like, the right to walk out any gate at any hour and never be asked where you are going." She paused. "The offer is to stay." "Sergeant?" "To simply stay." Bran looked at her. He did not say anything for a long time. She waited. He said, "Highness." "Yes." "I would like to offer a counter." She turned her head. "Yes." "I do not want a room without a job." "Sergeant?" "Highness, you have earned rest. I have earned the right to keep working. Those are two different things." She was quiet. He said, "I have 30 years of standing at gates. I have never had a son. I have never had a student. I have never had anyone to give any of it to. Kalen is 22. He is going to run a garrison one day. He needs a teacher. There are 12 corporals in the Western Quarter who need a teacher. Kyra will need people around her who know what to watch for, and who know how to teach her to watch. I would like to do that." Alvarez looked at him. She said quietly, "You want to teach?" "Highness, I want to be useful, not decorated." She nodded slowly. She said, "That can be arranged." "Thank you, Highness." "Sergeant." "Yes. You are refusing rest twice now, once with the title, once with the room. Are you certain?" He thought about it. He thought about Nella. He thought about Merritt. He thought about the coal ring in the guardhouse, and Kalen, and a girl he had failed to be 40 miles closer to. He said, "Highness, rest is what I have been doing for 5 years. It is not rest. It is holding still. There is a difference. I am ready to move again." She looked at him for a long moment. She said, "Sergeant Hollister." "Yes, Highness." "Will you stay?" He looked at Kyra across the garden, reading foundation marks to her tutor, silver streak catching the lantern light. He said yes. Alvarez did not speak. She looked at the moons. She said after a long moment, yes. Later, much later, when the guests had gone, and the aged tutor had been walked home by a page, and Kyra had been put to bed with her new book beside her pillow, and the queen had gone to her own chambers, Bran Hollister sat on the garden bench in the West Orchard and looked at the sketchbook in his lap. He turned the pages slowly. There were drawings of a woman, Alvarez, younger, laughing. Valen's hand had been kind to her. There were drawings of Kyra as a baby, as a toddler, as a small child of 3, in the last months of her father's life. There were drawings of ordinary things, a garden gate, a cup, a pair of hands. There was in the middle a portrait of a scarred human sergeant with graying temples. There was on the next page a promise to a girl who was then only 4, that if her father did not live to introduce her to a wall, she should find the wall herself. Bran closed the book. He held it against his chest. He looked up at the twin moons of Ashenvale. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat. He took out the small, smooth stone. He held it in his good hand. He looked at it. He thought about Merritt. He let himself think about her fully for the first time in 9 years. He thought about Nella. He let himself think about her fully for the first time in 5 years. He said quietly, out loud, to the moons, "I did not forget you." He did not need an answer. He said, and I did not stop. He sat in the garden a long time after that. The lanterns burned low. The twin moons crossed the roof of the palace. Somewhere in the palace, a small girl slept with a book of foundation marks by her pillow. And a queen who had not slept well in 3 years lay in her bed with her eyes closed and her breathing finally slow. And in a corridor of the palace at second bell of first watch, on the night after her 8th birthday, Princess Kyra of the Vareth padded barefoot on the cold stones, the way she had padded barefoot the day she had first heard the voice behind the map room. And she stopped at the door of a room the queen had said would be his. And she opened the door 1 inch and looked at the shape of a scarred human sergeant sitting in the chair by the window, with a sketchbook against his chest, and a small stone in his palm, and the twin moons on his face. He was not asleep. He was looking at the moons. He heard the door. He did not turn his head. He said very quietly, "Come in, princess, if you want." She did not come in. She stood in the doorway. She said, "I only wanted to look." "All right." "Sergeant?" "Yes." "Good night." "Good night, princess." She closed the door softly. She went back to her own room. She climbed into her own bed. She put her hand on the leather cover of the small book by her pillow. She closed her eyes. She slept. 2 weeks later, Kalen came to Bran's new quarters at 7th bell in the evening. He was carrying a folded uniform. He was carrying it the way a man carries a thing he does not yet feel he has earned. Bran opened the door. "Corporal." "Sergeant, you've been promoted." "Yes, Sergeant." "Sergeant now." "Yes, Sergeant." "Congratulations." "Thank you." Kalen stood in the doorway. He did not come in. Bran waited. Kalen said, "Sergeant." "Yes." "I have a question." "All right." "The Queen told the captain to promote me. The captain told me it was because I identified Vantis in the market. But the captain also said, he said the recommendation came from you." Bran was quiet. Kalen said, "Sergeant, did you recommend me?" "Yes." "Why?" Bran looked at him. He looked at the young man in the doorway. 22. Still carrying his uniform folded because he did not yet feel it fit. He said, "Because you learned. In 9 days, you learned to read a face across a market. In 11 bells, you learned to hold a ledger while the world was on fire. You will run this garrison one day. I would like to be here when you do." Kalen did not answer immediately. Then he said, very quietly, "Sergeant?" "Yes." "Nobody has ever." He stopped. Bran waited. Kalen said, "Nobody has ever said that to me before." Bran nodded. He said, "That's because they were waiting for me to say it." Kalen laughed, just once, just a small sound. Then he composed his face, the way a new sergeant composed his face. He said, "Sergeant, will you come to the promotion ceremony tomorrow?" "Yes." "Will you stand with me at the front?" "Yes." "Thank you, Sergeant." Kalen, "Yes." "Come in, sit down. I have something to teach you about the standing invitation to household councils, because you're going to be attending them in 6 months when I stop attending them, and you need to know what to watch for." Kalen came in. He sat down at the small table. Bran sat across from him. And for the next 3 hours, in a room with a window that looked out over the West Orchard, where a garden bench sat empty in the moonlight, Bran Hollister taught his corporal the specific reading of Vareth political faces at a council table, because Kalen needed to know, because Kyra needed people around her who knew what to watch for, because 30 years of standing at gates was worth something, because there is a specific shape a life takes when a man stops holding still and starts moving again. The rotation ended. Bran did not rotate out. He was seen most mornings walking from his palace quarters to the western garrison at first bell, walking back at 5th bell, sitting in the garden with a small girl who was now 8, reading foundation marks, teaching her how the marks were carved, how they were placed, which walls they held up. I was seen most afternoons at the garrison, in the training yard, with Kalen, and with the 12 corporals of the Western Quarter, and with 3 of the newer human recruits who did not yet know how to stand in a Vareth city without getting themselves noticed for the wrong reasons. He was seen most evenings at a table in the West Arcade, with Captain Ranulph, and sometimes the Queen, and sometimes the aged tutor, and sometimes Kyra if she had finished her lessons. He was not decorated. I was not titled. He was not on a ledger. He was in the specific Verith phrase for a person who had entered a household without a title and without a contract and without a name on a payroll held. The palace held him. The garrison held him. The princess held him. And Bran Hollister, who had asked for the posting nobody wanted so he would not have to see a girl, did the thing he had spent 5 years training himself not to do. He let himself be held back. On the anniversary of Nella's death, 6 years now, Kyra found Bran in the West Orchard at second bell of the afternoon. He was sitting on the bench. His hands were folded in his lap. He was not doing anything. Kyra sat down beside him. She did not speak for a long time. Then she said, "It's today." "Yes." "How did you know I would know?" "Because you're 8, and you notice things." "I noticed you were quiet at breakfast." "Yes." "My mother noticed too." "Yes." "She sent me." Bran looked at her. He said, "Did she?" "Yes." She said, "Kyra, go sit with him. He will not ask for it, but he needs it." Bran was quiet. Kyra took a small object out of her pocket. She placed it on the bench between them. It was a rock, small, smooth, gray, almost identical to the one in Bran's coat pocket. He looked at it. He looked at her. He said, "Where did you find this?" "In the West Orchard, this morning. I was looking. My mother told me the story. About Nella. About the rocks. About the kitchen table." "She told you?" "Yes, I asked her. She told me." Bran picked up the rock. He turned it in his hand. He said, "It's a good rock. I chose it carefully. I can tell." Kyra looked at him. She said, "Sergeant." "Yes. In case you forget how heavy things are." Bran closed his eyes. He did not shut it down. He did not shut anything down. He let it sit in his chest, the whole weight, the one he had carried in his pocket for 5 years without looking at, the one he had let himself feel for the first time in the princess's chamber the night the assassin came. He opened his eyes. He said, "Princess." "Yes." "Thank you." "You're welcome, Sergeant." She leaned against his good shoulder, the way she had leaned against his ribs in the corridor the night of the fire. Her head found the space between his shoulder and his collarbone as if she had measured it, which she had, twice now. She did not fall asleep this time. She just sat. He sat. The twin moons had not yet risen. The garden held its breath in the specific way a garden holds its breath in the afternoon when nothing is happening. And everything is happening. And a 50-year-old man is sitting on a bench with an 8-year-old girl who has given him a rock, because she has understood at 8 what most people never understand at 80, which is that you do not carry weight alone, you share it. And the sharing does not lighten it. The sharing changes what the weight is for. Bran put the new rock in his coat pocket, next to the old one. He did not take the old one out. He did not need to. The two rocks sat side by side, warm from his body, small, ordinary, heavy in the exact way that mattered. He looked at the top of Kyra's head against his shoulder, silver streak in the dark hair. He said very quietly to no one in particular, "To the garden, to the moons that had not yet risen, to Merritt and to Nella and to the man who had drawn his face in a sketchbook and written a promise to a girl who had not yet been born. I am still here." Kyra, who had not been listening for it, heard it anyway. She reached up, very small, very careful. She put her hand on his forearm, the way she had put her hand on his forearm in her sleep the night of the fire, the way a child holds on to something she has decided is hers. She said, "Yes, you are," and they sat in the garden, together, until the twin moons rose, and the palace lanterns came on, and a queen who had learned to sit still walked out into the garden to find them, and sat down on the bench across from them, and did not speak, because there was nothing to say, because the walls were holding, because the child was alive, because the man was here. Because the story that had begun in a burning city, with a small hand reaching for a scarred forearm, had in the end done what stories do when they are given the time, and the care, and the walls thick enough. It had made a family, out of a soldier who had asked for the posting nobody wanted, out of a queen who had not slept in 3 years, out of a child who had memorized a face from a sketchbook when she was 6, out of a promise a dead man had written on a page, out of a rock in a coat pocket, out of a wall.